Afternoon, everyone. So, pleasure to be here, and I haven't got a big presentation lined up, but I thought I'd share with you what I think are sort of 6 fundamental lessons around transforming the Met Police. Their goal, and it's a pretty ambitious one, is to become the first truly digital police force. And this is, when any of you who've had dealings with the police, you'll know that actually they are very old-fashioned in terms of their technology, and I'll come into some of that a bit later. But it really is a massive opportunity to transform how policing is done in the UK, and actually worldwide. If the UK is going to be a world leader in the use of technology in policing when we complete our journey, because actually this is a challenge that's affecting many forces around the world. But a little bit about me. How did I get here? So I've had a long career in technology, been at Ford for a long time, and then I was in the financial services area. I was at UBS for 7 years, and then I joined the Met Police as their CIO 2 years ago. So pretty much a real case of poacher turned gamekeeper, going from financial services to policing. But the Met Police, we're probably not, I'm not sure how much you really know about it. It's actually 180 years old, over 180 years old, and it supports all policing in the Greater London Authority area. So that's over 8 million people that we look after. We have over 55,000 people in the Met, and there's 32,000 officers. So that's a large employer in London. I think it's one of the largest employers in London. And we have a revenue of £3.2 billion annually. So that's £3.2 billion annually spent on policing. We police not only the capital, but also diplomatic protection, so royalty, Westminster, and also we have responsibility for counter-terrorism in the UK and abroad. So there's a lot of arms to this, but it is a big deal. We deal with about 5 million calls annually to our help desk, principally 999, but also 101. And we arrest about 180,000 people a year. But interestingly, we have less than about 100 murders a year that we're dealing with. So it's actually a pretty safe place, London, compared to most capital cities around the world. In terms of IT, we spend about £250 million a year on IT, and I have a team of about 500 people in the police activity, and we have obviously suppliers that support us. So that's a bit about the background, but what do we really need to do to transform the Met Police? How can we really become a digital police force? So for me, this all started with really linking technology to business goals. So the first point I would say is you've got to have a very clear link between your technology and between your business goals. And they should absolutely feel like they're one and the same thing. So in terms of policing, what that felt like was the ability for an officer, when they walk down a street anywhere in London, they should be able to know everything that the Met knows about that street. Because actually we have a lot of information within the Met about London. So you walk down any street, and we pick sort of Acacia Avenue as our example street, and you should know when you're walking down that street whether there's repeat victims in that street, so somebody who's had a number of incidents and has been victim a couple of times. You should know if there's known offenders living down that street. You should know if there's somebody on probation, if they're maybe potentially breaking a curfew, so you could go and knock on the door and check whether they're there, whether they're a gang member, or even at behind certain doors, whether there's firearms, if there's known firearms at those addresses. All that information should be available to an officer as they walk down the street. Now, today, they don't. They know nothing. They're walking around London. They have no clue what they're dealing with. And when they go to a call, when they get a 999 call, they go to an address, they walk in that door, they have absolutely no idea what they're going to face. And yet that is despite the Met having all that knowledge and that information. So it's all about providing mobile information access for those officers. That information should be at their fingertips, it should be guiding them, it should be informing them, and it should be helping them make London safe and make the kind of arrests and do investigations and analytics that actually they could do if they just had that information. So it's about describing really that goal as really being one and the same. Business and technology, it's one single goal. So that's the first point I would make, is you've got to have that really seamless integration of your goals. Then you're going to have your top-level sponsorship and support. So in the Met, the Commissioner, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, was very, very clear about understanding the need for his officers to have technology. He recognised that where the Met is outdated, it's outmoded in the way they operate. But it was very clear to him that he had to transform. He didn't quite know what he needed to do. He didn't know how the technology could do it, but he knew he needed to use technology to help him. So you really need that top-level support. And by getting the vision in a joint way, you can help build that support. So he was then able to articulate that vision of what he needed for London and technology. And that transformed his vision of policing. So before I arrived, they had a number of policing objectives, total policing they call it, and they called it total victim care, and total investigation and prosecutions and things, but they didn't mention technology. And then after the conversations we had around how we were going to use technology, suddenly total technology became one of the 4 pillars of his vision, which was moving forward, that he knew he needed to use technology, and technology was a critical enabler for him. So you need that support at that senior level, and then in turn think people like the Deputy Mayor, the people who've got the money in this place, because actually the police get their money provided them by local authority, so we have to convince them as well, because ultimately we're spending over £200 million in the next 3 years completely transforming the policing service in London, and that's a lot of money, and they need to know that that's going to be spent wisely, and we've got to get their confidence. So it's all about having that top-level sponsorship and support, and we spent many day-long sessions with the management board, taking them through the technology strategy in detail, how it was going to enable policing to do what they wanted to do, getting that feedback and evolving that vision in a joint way so they felt complete ownership as well. It wasn't seen as a technology thing, it was actually seen as a policing thing. I'd say the other aspect then of what we've done, and this is really around innovation and so on, is that there's my experience is there's no such thing as no real new ideas. It's always a combination of old ideas that you use in a new and unique way to transform the way that you get things done. And so for us, a simple example of that is, as I said, the officers go out, they go to a crime, they might go to a domestic violence situation, and in fact in London 20 to 30% of the crimes are domestic violence related, so a very high number. It's a typical common scenario. They'd go to that incident and they'd turn up there with their notepad and they'd start writing, right, what's your name? You know, yes, where do you live? Yeah, okay, what's your phone number? And they'd start writing all this information down about what was going on, can I take your statement? And they would also, if there was children involved, so there might be children nearby, then you've got to have a different form, so a different notebook because you've got children involved, and then they need another notebook for other circumstances. So they'd carry around a wad of notebooks with them, and this is a 180-year-old technology, in effect, that they're using. And so what we've done is combine that, in effect, with, if you like, a digital camera. And so by giving them a mobile device, in this case it's an iPad, they now have those things combined, and they've now got the electronic statement, the e-statement, which is suddenly a much more effective way of policing. So now they're turning up, they get the information already presented to them, it's already there because we know it, the name, the address, the phone number, all the details, you can just confirm it, and now you're starting taking the statement. You can take photos, you can take video, and this is critically important, particularly in those kind of scenarios, because actually, when you take a photo, as we all know, photo is worth 1,000 words. So when you turn up in court and you see a photo of, you know, a female victim who's badly injured, or you might have some video of the situation, shouting and screaming and everything that's going on, actually to the jury, suddenly they totally get the situation. And whereas, you know, in the past, or you've got a written statement, so you had to have an officer reading out, I entered the premises, there was a lot of shouting and screaming. You know, it doesn't have that same impact. And in fact, what we've found is that 15%, more than 15% now, are guilty pleas, immediate guilty pleas. So as soon as we show the suspect, here's the photos, here's some video, they go, oh yeah, okay, I plead guilty. So immediately you're saving all that time and all that effort to get a prosecution, you know, to get a conviction that previously was going through courts and costing a lot of time and effort, and may not always end up in a guilty result actually at the end of it either. So by using new technology combined with traditional methods, we've suddenly got a complete transformation of how policing work is being done. And obviously then, having given a mobile electronic device, suddenly now you open up a whole plethora of other future opportunities. So even simple things like using Google Translate. So now an officer, when they're faced with someone who doesn't speak very good English, and in London, over 30% of the population is non-native English speaking. So suddenly you might have a Lithuanian person, Romanian, and you can now use things like Google Translate. It's much, much more effective to deal with the people, the victims that you're dealing with. And obviously from the victim's perspective, it's massively more professional now when they have an officer turn up with an electronic device, got all the information, capture the details. It's done. They get their crime reference now online, so it's real time. In the past, they would often have to wait 3 or more days to just get a crime reference number that they can use for insurance purposes, etc. So complete transformation of the experience from the victim's perspective as well. So that's just an example of how, through using new and innovative technologies, you can actually transform the way that the old work is being done. We also, I think, had to sell that vision, because equally it's about moving quickly, because it's very easy to sort of sell those concepts, but then if nothing happens for 2 or 3 years, actually everyone's lost interest and people moved on, and the police, like a lot of other places, people move on pretty quickly. So you've got to be bold and ambitious and innovative to win the hearts and minds, and you've got to deliver fast as well. So what we did was we implemented a pilot with 500 iPads, one borough. We picked on one borough, Hammersmith and Fulham, and rolled out 500 iPads out there within 6 months. So having had the business cases approved in December last year, in July we had 500 iPads out there working, officers using them to record the crimes, do the electronic witness statements, etc. It's all about moving fast and quickly and agile to keep the interest going, to keep the momentum. In the old days, previously when the police tried to do this, and they did it with what's called operational PDAs, back in 2007, the funding was approved in mid-2007. The first devices arrived in 2011. Right? So 4 years from actually starting to delivery. Of course, by then they'd chosen Windows CE, so it was completely out of date. It was just... So if you go through the old ways of sort of traditional procurement and all that kind of stuff, you're going to always go very slowly, and particularly in the public sector. Obviously, private sector is different, but in the public sector, there's a lot of procurement barriers you have to overcome. So I think it's about being bold and ambitious, but also being able to turn that into delivery very quickly. The other thing we did, again, around delivering quickly was we implemented a PNC search. So it's one of the things that people do, the police officers will do, is their PNC check. And very often what they'll see is if they're on the radio, they'll use their radio systems to do that, radio back to the command and control center, and they type it in. In order to do a PNC check, which is basically a check of someone's criminal record, are they wanted, have outstanding crimes, etc., you have to go on a week-long course, training course, to use the PNC system. A week-long course. This is because it is so complicated in terms of the flags and the indicators and interpretation of the results that come back from this massive database in the Home Office provide. So as an example, one of the reasons, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but one of the reasons is that, for example, there's a flag called FI, and if you know that somebody has an FI flag, then what that can indicate is that they have a conviction for firearms involvement. So in other words, they could well be carrying a weapon. So if you stop someone and they've got an FI flag, then that would indicate they may well be carrying a weapon. It's something you want to know. Actually, that indicator, FI, can also, in certain circumstances, mean that they are a female impersonator. So you want to make sure you get those interpretation of those flags right. It's just an example. It's so complicated. So what we've done is we've created an interface that we developed that allows us to do that through a mobile device, and actually it's effectively like a Google search. So you type in Richard Thwaite, you also have to put in your reasons. You can't just search for anybody without any reasons. You put in your reasons, your officer warrant number, and boom, it will come back. Here's the Richard Thwaites that we know about. Here's the sorted in the most relevant order that we think might be useful for you, and any known indicators like firearms or violent offender or GBH convictions, whatever, would be flagged up straight away and highlighted. So that's what we've done, and we've implemented that. Again, really powerful tool that officers can then use. So now any officer can provide that, can get that access. So those are the sort of things. In order to do that, we've used agile development. So we developed things very quickly using agile. Minimum viable products, really important. You've got to govern your agile developments really very thoroughly and make sure you don't just end up developing non-value add stuff. So it's really important you get your minimal viable product defined and absolutely gripped, and you have, in our case, police officers heavily involved in those Scrum teams. So we had really good officers as part of those Scrum teams helping to define and develop the products, so we knew exactly what we were going to deliver. And then finally, the last thing I would say is just you've got to keep selling the story. Sell it in simple terms. So one example I often give is that policing, it's quite a simple process. In a regular business, a private companies, you talk about going from a prospect to a sale. That's your process. Policing, we go from suspect to jail. It's the same fundamental process. There's nothing really different about policing, so don't overcomplicate it. It's actually fairly straightforward. And this is the sort of message we give, right? This is your office. It's our job to keep you there, right? That's what digital policing is about. It's about making sure the officers are out on the street and not back in the police station. Today they spend often up to 50% of their time in a police station because they're putting in these statements, they're typing it all in, doing it all back in the station. Our goal is to get them out there 90% of the time, dealing with crime, arresting suspects, and building public confidence. That's what the Financial Times made of our story. I think that's quite a nice little comment. Thank you. Hopefully it's been useful for you.